3:47 a.m. in Dubai. The server rooms at Bybit are humming along seemingly normal, but silently a catastrophe is unfolding. In mere moments, hackers, later linked to North Korea, execute a $1.5 billion heist. They didn't kick down the doors, they used compromised keys, and they weren't alone. In just the first half of 2025, wallet compromises accounted for, $1.7 billion in losses? The landscape of digital asset security has, it's fundamentally shifted. We are no longer protecting against physical theft. We are fighting sophisticated digital subversion.
And that is a terrifying statistic, and it really sets the stage for exactly why we're here today. The industry's response to this threat landscape has been a flood of hardware wallets, all promising to be the ultimate shield. Today, we're dissecting one of the loudest, most premium entrants into this space, the Onekey PRO. It positions itself as the next generation of security, but the question we have to ask is whether a $278 gadget is actually the solution or if it's just, security theater wrapped in a smartphone chassis.
That is a central question we're debating today. Is the Onekey PRO a necessary evolution in security architecture that's worth that premium price tag, or is it an over-engineered luxury item? To answer this, we're basing today's discussion on extensive data, technical specs, and review material, including some really critical insights from Maxim Anisimov, the author of a detailed analysis on bytework.com.
And before we dive into the silicon and the software, we do have a request for you, the listener. If you enjoy this kind of deep dive, rigorous analysis where we don't pull any punches, please subscribe to the channel, hit that like button, and most importantly, leave a comment sharing your thoughts. Is this wallet worth the hype, or would you stick with the classics? We really do want to hear your perspective.
I'll start by laying out my position. We're no longer in the era where a simple USB stick with a PIN code is sufficient for serious crypto investors. The primary vectors of theft today are phishing and blind signing, where you approve a transaction without knowing what it truly does. The Onekey PRO represents a necessary leap because it integrates a smartphone-like user experience, a 3.5-inch color touchscreen, haptic feedback, which frankly lowers the barrier to entry for self-custody. But more importantly, under the hood, it boasts 4 EAL6 Plus secure element chips. This isn't just redundancy, this is a new standard for handling complex, multi-chain portfolios in a Web3 world.
I see the appeal of the specs. I really do. But I come at this from a fundamental security philosophy. Security correlates with simplicity. The more complex a system, the larger the attack surface. More places for things to go wrong. The Onekey PRO is $278. A Trezor Model 1 is, roughly $50? When you add biometric sensors, cameras, color touchscreens, and support for 30,000 assets, you aren't just adding features, you're adding potential points of failure. My argument is that for the vast majority of users, this device is just overkill. It solves problems that don't exist for the average holder, while introducing new complexities that might actually hinder security hygiene.
I think that view of simplicity is perhaps a bit nostalgic, given the sophistication of modern attacks. Let's look at the hardware architecture, specifically the point you just mentioned, the chips. The Onekey PRO utilizes 4 EAL6 Plus certified secure element chips. These are the TMC TH89 chips.
Before you go on, for the benefit of our listeners who might not be hardware engineers, can we clarify what EAL6 Plus actually implies?
Absolutely. EAL stands for Evaluation Assurance Level. It's a grading system for how thoroughly a security product has been tested. EAL6 Plus is incredibly high. It's military grade. It means the chip is resistant to sophisticated physical attacks, like someone using lasers to read the memory or monitoring power consumption to guess the private key. Most bank cards are EAL5, so EAL6 Plus is, it's the gold standard.
Right, so we have 4 of these gold standard chips. Why 4?
It's about segmentation and parallel processing. In a single-chip architecture, the processor is forced to handle logic it wasn't strictly optimized for, and that creates a bottleneck. The Onekey PRO distributes the load. One chip might handle private key storage for a specific curve, another handles communication encryption, another identity authentication. These chips are designed to handle different cryptographic algorithms and data sizes across blockchains simultaneously. You're future-proofing the device against the increasing complexity of cryptographic standards.
I'm sorry, I just don't buy that having 4 chips is inherently safer than having one. In fact, I would argue it might be marketing excess. Quad-core security sounds good on a box, but let's think about the architecture. Leading competitors like Ledger or Trezor use 1 or 2 chips very effectively. When you introduce 4 separate secure elements, you're introducing 4 distinct components that need to communicate with the main microcontroller. That internal communication bus, the wiring connecting them, is a potential attack vector, however small.
You think the wiring itself is the vulnerability?
Potentially, complexity is the enemy. Does a user holding Bitcoin and maybe some Ethereum need 4 chips to sign a transaction? Is there any proven security benefit to quad chips documented in the industry? Or is this just spec sheet padding to justify a $278 price point? It feels like selling a car with 2 engines. It sounds impressive, but unless you're towing a space shuttle, does it actually drive better, or does it just break down twice as often?
That's an interesting analogy. Though I would frame it differently. It's not 2 engines. It's more like having a dedicated GPU, CPU, and NPU in a computer. It's specialization. And that processing power facilitates the next major feature, true air-gap signing. The Onekey PRO uses a built-in 2-megapixel camera and QR codes to sign transactions. You never have to physically connect this device to a computer. No USB, no Bluetooth if you don't want it. It even includes a flashlight next to the camera to ensure scanning reliability in low light. This creates a perfect isolation layer. The private keys are literally air-gapped from the internet.
Perfect is a very strong word. Let's look at the practicality of that air gap. The source material we reviewed points out a glaring exception, the Bitcoin Lightning Network.
Which is a Layer 2 protocol, to be fair.
Correct, but it's essential for modern Bitcoin usage. If you want to use Lightning on the Onekey PRO, you cannot use the QR code air gap method. The data is too complex for the QR implementation. You are forced to connect via cable or Bluetooth. So the moment you need that functionality, your perfect air gap is broken. Furthermore, have you ever tried signing a complex smart contract via QR codes? It involves scanning multiple animated QR codes in sequence. It is high friction. If security is too annoying, users will bypass it. If users end up just plugging it in via USB to save time, then the premium they paid for the air gap feature is, well, it's wasted.
I can concede that Lightning is an exception, but for the base layer settlement of high-value assets, your life savings, the air gap remains superior. But let's talk about that friction you mentioned regarding smart contracts. This is where the Onekey PRO actually solves the biggest security threat we face: blind signing.
Define that for us. Blind signing.
Blind signing is when you interact with a decentralized application, like a crypto exchange, and your wallet just asks you to approve a complex hexadecimal string. You can't read it. You have no idea if you're swapping a token or giving a hacker permission to drain your wallet. You are signing blindly.
And how does Onekey solve this better than others?
It features something called SignuGuard technology. Because it has that large 3.5-inch screen and powerful processing, it parses the transaction data locally. It translates the code. So it doesn't just show you a hex code. It shows you exactly what is happening in plain English. You are approving a transfer of XUSDT to this address. Furthermore, it checks this against the database of known phishing contracts. This addresses the human element. Most people lose money because they click approve on a scam site. SignuGuard is the seatbelt that stops you from flying through the windshield.
That is a compelling argument, and I agree, blind signing is a plague. But have you considered the limitations of that approach? SignuGuard relies on a database. A database is essentially a blacklist, and blacklists are reactive, not proactive. If a hacker deploys a brand new malicious contract 5 minutes ago, it won't be in the database. The user might see a green checkmark or just a lack of warning and assume it's safe. That false sense of security is dangerous.
But surely some protection is better than none.
Not if it makes the user complacent. And there's another layer to this trust issue. While Onekey makes a big deal about their firmware being open source, which I applaud, The secure element chips themselves, those 4 chips you love, are not open source. They're bound by NDAs, non-disclosure agreements. So we have this small black box in the security stack. You're trusting that the signal guard logic interacting with those chips is doing exactly what it says without full visibility into the hardware logic.
To be fair, every secure element in the industry, from the one in your credit card to the one in your passport, operates under similar NDAs. That is the nature of the semiconductor industry. However, the firmware that calls those chips is open source and verifiable via checksums, and that is a massive step forward compared to some competitors.
We can agree that open source firmware is a win.
Exactly. But I want to pivot to the user experience, specifically the setup. We aren't just protecting cypherpunks, we're protecting everyday people. The Onekey PRO transitions from the tedious seed phrase entry to biometrics. You can set it up in under a minute. The fingerprint sensor on the power button allows for quick authentication. You don't have to peck out a PIN code on a tiny screen every single time you want to check your balance. That ease of use encourages people to actually use the device rather than leaving funds on an exchange because the cold wallet is too much hassle.
Ease of use is only a benefit if it works reliably. This is where I have to bring up the findings from Maxim Anasimov's review on buyatwork.com. He explicitly found the fingerprint sensor temperamental. He noted that it was difficult to register the print compared to a standard smartphone. If you're in a rush to move funds and your biometric sensor fails 3 times, locking you out or forcing you to enter a PIN anyway, that isn't a premium experience. That's a gimmick.
Smartphones have spoiled us, but the backup PIN is always there.
But philosophically, I worry about biometrics in crypto. If I am forced to unlock my phone by law enforcement or a criminal, a fingerprint is easy to coerce. They just grab your hand. A PIN code exists only in my mind. By relying on biometrics, are we trading censorship resistance for convenience?
I think you're focusing on edge cases of coercion rather than the daily reality of user fatigue. The average user loses funds because they're lazy with security, not because they're being interrogated. But let's look at the scope of what this wallet protects. This isn't just a Bitcoin wallet. It offers universality. It supports over 100 blockchains and over 30,000 assets. We're talking EVM chains, Solana, obscure altcoins. It handles them all. For a modern investor who isn't a Bitcoin maximalist, who participates in Web3, this device is a powerhouse. You can manage your entire portfolio, from NFTs to stablecoins, on one device with a screen large enough to actually view your NFTs.
But this brings up the master of none problem. You support 30,000 assets, sure, but how deep is that support? The source material highlights that for privacy-focused Bitcoin users, there is no coin control feature yet.
Coin control being the ability to select specifically which bits of Bitcoin you spend?
Exactly. It's a basic privacy requirement for serious Bitcoiners to avoid linking their identities across transactions. It's missing.
Maxim Anisimov also noted that the XRP network showed up as blank or unsupported in some views during his testing. When you try to do everything, you often end up with bugs in the specific implementations. A $50 wallet that does Bitcoin perfectly might be better than a $278 wallet that does 30,000 things adequately. Complexity is the enemy of security, and supporting that many chains requires a massive code base that is just harder to audit.
I would argue that software updates can address coin control and UI bugs, and Onekey pushes updates frequently. But there's another feature that justifies the price and the complexity, one that merges 2 worlds. FIDO key functionality. The ability to use it as a login key for websites?
Yes, the Onekey PRO replaces devices like YubiKeys. It can secure your Google account, your Binance login, your Apple ID via passkeys. We are moving toward a passwordless future. By buying this device, you're getting a top-tier crypto wallet and a hardware security key for your digital life. It consolidates your security posture. That dual utility is why the price is $278. You aren't just buying a wallet, you're buying a digital identity vault.
And that is exactly what terrifies me. I'm sorry, but I just don't think it's wise to carry your life savings around as a logging key for your email. Separation of concerns is a fundamental security principle. If I lose my YubiKey, I lose access to my email temporarily. I get a backup. If I lose my Onekey PRO that I'm carrying around to log into Gmail at a coffee shop, I am physically losing custody of my cold storage device. Sure, I have the seed phrase at home, but I've now exposed my physical device to the world.
A cold wallet should be cold. It should sit in a safe. It shouldn't be in your pocket acting as a 2FA dongle for Facebook.
I see why you think that, but let me give you a different perspective. The device is encrypted. Even if lost without the PIN or fingerprint, it's a brick. And the reality is, people lose things they don't use often. If you use your Onekey PRO daily as a FIDO key, you know exactly where it is. You're maintaining it, you're keeping it charged. A wallet that sits in a dusty drawer for 3 years is a wallet that might have a dead battery or forgotten firmware when you finally need it. Active security is better than passive neglect.
That's a fair point on battery maintenance, though I'd argue a paper wallet never runs out of battery. But let's get down to the brass tacks. The verdict on the price. $278. For that price, I could buy a Trezor Safe 3 for my long-term storage, a YubiKey for my email, and still have $150 left over to buy actual Bitcoin.
You're doing the parts versus labor math.
It's the utility per dollar math. You mentioned institutional confidence because Coinbase Ventures backed them. That's great for the company, but for the user, it feels like a luxury item. It competes with the Ledger stacks. It's for people who want their wallet to look cool on a desk, not necessarily for people who want the most rugged, battle-tested security per dollar.
It is an investment. You aren't just paying for plastic and silicon. You're paying for the checksum-verified open-source firmware. You're paying for the supply chain security, the tamper-evident packaging that Maxim Anisimov described, the self-destruct labels on the box. You were paying for the large IPS screen that actually allows you to verify data without squinting at a scrolling ticker on a tiny dongle. When you are securing potentially tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars, pinching pennies on the hardware that secures it is a false economy. The Onekey PRO offers a user experience that reduces the likelihood of human error. That is worth $278.
It's worth it if you use those features. But if you are a buy and hold investor, the large screen is a luxury, not a necessity. The biometric sensor is a convenience, not a vault door. And the 4 chips, well, the jury is still out on whether that provides any tangible benefit over standard industry practices. I stand by the idea that for a newcomer, this price point is a barrier to entry, not an invitation.
We've covered a lot of ground, from the silicon architecture to the philosophy of air gapping. To summarize my position, the Onekey PRO is a response to a modernized threat landscape. The 1.5 billion lost in the Bybit hack and the billions lost to blind signing prove that we need smarter devices. The combination of SignaGuard, the large verification screen, and the air-gapped camera system provides the defense-in-depth strategy that simpler wallets just cannot match. It is a premium tool for a high-stakes environment.
And I maintain that while the device is an impressive piece of engineering, it suffers from feature creep. The quad-chip architecture feels like marketing. The biometric sensor has reliability concerns, as noted by independent reviewers. And the price point puts it out of reach for the people who need self-custody the most. Security does not require a $278 touchscreen. It requires rigorous hygiene, which can be achieved with much cheaper, simpler hardware.
I think we can find convergence on one critical point, however: the open source nature of the firmware. Regardless of the hardware price, the fact that Onekey allows independent verification of the code and provides checksums is a massive positive for the industry.
Absolutely. In an industry of trust me, bro, being able to verify the code is essential. And I will concede that the large touchscreen does significantly improve the ability to verify addresses compared to the tiny screens on older dongles. Being able to see the full address at a glance without scrolling is a legitimate security feature.
Ultimately, whether you buy a $50 device or the $278 Onekey PRO, a wallet is only as secure as the user's practices. Writing down that seed phrase correctly and verifying it via the check recovery phrase feature we saw in the settings remains the most critical step.
Precisely. No chip, no matter how EAL certified, can save you if you give your seed phrase to a phishing site.
And that brings us to the end of this debate. We hope this exchange has illuminated the trade-offs between premium features and rugged simplicity.
Decide for yourself if you need military-grade complexity or just a digital safe. Thank you for listening.